German criminologist Stephen Harbort once conducted a study looking at the factors which contribute towards escaping an encounter with a serial killer. After examining over 150 German killers and their individual crimes, he obtained an interesting statistic. On average, these murderers initiated contact with 31 potential targets before getting a victim under their control. This means that there are far more people who narrowly avoided a grim fate than one might expect. Most of them probably don't even realize it, but that's not the case for the following entries. They know full well that they went up against pure evil and are lucky to be alive today. For decades, people in Wichita, Kansas lived with the genuine concern that they might have been stalked by one of America's most notorious serial killers, Dennis Rader, aka BTK. Rader showed restraint and control throughout his murder spree. He could wait for years between kills and would abandon a target if the conditions weren't right. He also scouted any potential victims and followed women around for extended periods of time. When Rader was finally captured in 2005, he was preparing for his 11th murder after a 14-year hiatus. Once BTK was in jail and everyone knew his identity, many women from Sedgwick County understandably wanted to know if they had ever been targeted by Rader. Some of them even wrote to him in prison, and he often wrote back. One woman, we'll identify as K, was haunted by a break-in from 1981. She gave him all the details of that night and asked plainly if he was the one responsible. Always writing in the third person, Rader cited a reliable source and avoided a straight answer initially, but eventually he admitted that it wasn't the source, insinuating that it indeed was him. BTK's most infamous close call was Anna Williams. On April 28, 1979, Rader was sitting in her home waiting for Williams to arrive from square dancing. However, Anna got delayed after stopping by her daughter's house. Eventually, Rader got sick of waiting and left. He did make sure that she knew how narrowly she avoided a visit from BTK by sending her a 19-line poem entitled, "Oh Anna, Why Didn't You Appear?" Stephen Morin went on a decade-long murder spree in the 1970s. He would often travel from state to state and use false identities, earning him the moniker the Chameleon. He was executed in 1985 for 3 murders and was named a suspect in over 30 more killings across the United States. Morin's execution proved problematic because he was a heavy drug user. It took the technician over 40 minutes to find a suitable vein. Morin's final words were a prayer, as the murderer apparently had embraced Christianity right towards the end of his killing spree. In fact, it was the last woman he kidnapped who converted him. When possible, Morin spent a lot of time with his victims, traveling from one motel to another and brutally violating them. When he abducted Margaret Palm in 1981, Morin was already on the run as police were after him for the murder of Carrie Mary Scott. The two drove for 10 hours, and Palm persuaded him to listen to tapes of a Texas evangelist named Kenneth Copeland. Later, she read to him from her journal of Bible verses. This affected Morin enough to let Palm go. According to her, the killer was on his way to turn himself in to Reverend Copeland when he was arrested at a bus stop. Todd Kohlkepp started his criminal career at an early age. Back in 1986, a 15-year-old Kohlkepp kidnapped a young girl who was his age, took her back home, and violated her. He was charged in 1987 and served 14 years in prison. Released in 2001, Kohlkepp started his killing spree a couple of years later. Fast forward to 2016. 30-year-old Kayla Brown and her boyfriend, Charles Carver, were hired by Kohlkepp, who is now a successful realtor, to work on his land. They went missing soon after. A few months later, detectives began searching Kohlkepp's property after tracing the couple's last cell phone signals to that area. They found Kayla Brown chained to the wall inside a storage container where she had been living for the past 2 months. Police also found Charles Carver's body on the premises. Kohlkepp had shot him multiple times for being smart-mouthed. Subsequently, Kayla revealed that Kohlkepp once dragged her to 3 graves on the property and said that she would go into one of them if she didn't behave. That's when investigators first realized that they could be dealing with a serial killer. Eventually, they found the bodies of another couple who had gone missing the year before. However, most shocking was when Kohlkepp confessed to the unsolved mass murder of 4 people in a shootout at a superbike motor shop back in 2003. In 1986, Kate Moir was just 17 when she was abducted by Australia's most infamous killer couple, David and Catherine Birnie. By then, they had already kidnapped, violated, and murdered 4 women within the span of a month. After picking up Moir at knife point, the couple took her to their home in Perth, where they tormented and violated her repeatedly. That night, Kate had to sleep in the same bed as the Birnies, handcuffed to David. Kate managed to escape the next day when David left for work. During a drug buy at the door, Catherine forgot to chain up her captive, and Kate was able to escape through the window. Afterward, the victim had the unexpected obstacle of getting the police to believe her story. In fact, the higher-ups at Palmyra Police Station weren't convinced and assigned the 22-year-old rookie Laura Hancock to Kate's case. Unlike her superiors, Constable Hancock believed Kate due to the amount of detail that she was able to provide. She knew the couple had a Rocky VHS tape and a Dire Straits cassette because they were playing that while she was a captive. Kate also knew the name of her captor was David Birnie, even though he had used an alias because she saw it on a medicine bottle. She even described the little drawings that she had made around the house to convince others she was there. This was enough for police to investigate and eventually arrest the Birnies. Subsequently, David confessed to 4 murders and took investigators to the graves. For 37 years, Rhonda Stapley kept quiet about her ordeal. Back then, she was a 21-year-old student at the University of Utah who made the mistake of accepting a ride from a stranger she thought was handsome. However, the man who identified himself as Ted took her in his Volkswagen Beetle to an isolated canyon area where he violated her and choked her repeatedly as she slipped in and out of consciousness. Somehow, Rhonda managed to survive by jumping into a nearby mountain stream and being carried by the powerful current out of Ted's reach. She made it back to civilization and didn't speak to anyone about what had happened that horrible night. It was a year later, during his first arrest, that Stapley realized she had almost become another victim of Ted Bundy. Then came a wave of guilt, as she realized that maybe Bundy could have been captured sooner if she had come forward with her story. Rhonda was afraid that being labeled as a victim would prevent her friends and family members from ever looking at her the same again. It wasn't until 2011 that Stapley made her ordeal public. She talked with fellow survivors on anonymous online boards and kept a journal which she presented to true crime author Anne Rule, who encouraged her to turn it into a book. On March 17, 1985, 29-year-old Maria Hernandez was pulling into the garage of her home in Rosemead, California. As she exited the car, she heard a noise. Turning around, Maria saw a strange man who crept up on her and shoved a gun in her face. little did she know that she was standing face to face with the man who was about to terrorize Los Angeles in the following months as the Night Stalker. Without saying a word, Richard Ramirez pointed the gun at Maria's face and fired. Afterward, he went inside her condominium. There, Ramirez shot her roommate, Dale Okazaki. Miraculously, Maria survived by putting her hands in front of her face. The bullet bounced off her keys and hit her in the right hand. Okazaki wasn't so fortunate. Still outside, Maria ran and hid behind a car. Ramirez wanted to shoot her again as he exited the building, but instead chose to make a quick escape. Hernandez ran inside the condominium to try and help her roommate, but Okazaki was already dead. A year later, Maria was standing across from the Night Stalker again, but this time she was testifying to help send him to the gas chamber. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Until next time, stay safe out there.